C8. Your body speak, body language, right? C5. I need to have a new class. Let's welcome our guest, Pierre. Pierre, before you deliver speech, tell us what is your favorite sport?
Well, tonight I practiced my favorite sport coming here.
Jogging or running?
Because I couldn't find a place and I thought I'd be late.
Okay, thank you.
Just before I start, hopefully you don't mind if I just say this for a few seconds. Can I just draw a quick diagram before you start to time me? Because I think my speech will be quite tight for the time. So if I draw a diagram,
No problem.
just very quick diagram, and maybe I can show you this book. Because it's just an adventure story.
Your book?
You read Chinese?
No. Just look at the pictures. So if I can show you this book, maybe you can pass the book around. But just briefly, I can just tell you, it's just about, my speech is about an adventure story on Mount Everest. Okay, so if I just say, Mount Everest, at about 29,000 feet, is the highest mountain in the world. And I just want to briefly just tell you a little bit of a story about it. So Mount Everest crosses the Chinese border and the Nepal border, or the Nepalese side. So you can see the Chinese side. And the height is 29,000 feet. So that's the highest mountain, is the highest mountain in the world. It's not the most difficult to climb. The most difficult to climb is the second highest, which is K2. So that's the second highest. That's much more difficult. But what makes Mount Everest so dangerous is that it is so high that above about here, at 26,000 feet, there is very little oxygen. So maybe I can just do it here, a little diagram here, and this will probably be 27,000 feet here. Okay, right. So there's, I can say, from 26,000 upwards, there is very little oxygen, and it's only about 1/3 the oxygen that you find on the ground. So if you don't breathe bottled oxygen above this height, you will probably die. So above this height is called the death zone. To all mountain climbers, it's called the death zone. So that's what makes Everest so dangerous. So I can start my speech. I'll say Mount Everest was first climbed in 1953. And in the last 20 years, many countries and climbers have had their dream to climb this mountain. Unfortunately, these days, many inexperienced people want to climb the mountain too. If you want to climb Mount Everest, it will cost you, they will charge you about, starting at $80,000 US. And of course, China and Nepal make a lot of money from everybody going up the mountain. The safest times to climb the mountain are usually in May and September, and that's when everybody wants to go up. This is a problem because it leads to traffic jams of people on the mountain, all going up at the same time, and they're all moving slowly. So if you remember that once you get past here, there's very little oxygen, and the problem is the slower you go, the colder you get. The story about this includes this book I mentioned. I showed you briefly this book, so you can see the book. It's about the May 1996 climbing season, which was the worst season on Mount Everest. 16 people died from the USA, New Zealand, Indian and Taiwanese expeditions. They died either by freezing to death or falling off the mountain. On May the 9th, 1996, within hours of each other, the US and New Zealand teams started climbing up from this point. This is their camp, their tents. They started climbing up to 29,000 feet. So they started to climb up from 29,000 feet. The US and New Zealand teams had many inexperienced climbers in them, so it took them a long time to get to the top from this point. Team leaders always want their paying customers to get to the top quickly so they can do their photo at the top, do their V for Victory photo before 1 p.m. if possible. And then the goal is to quickly get the climbers down again. To get them down again, the reason for the 1 p.m. turnaround is that often in the afternoon a storm will move in, and the team leaders want all their climbers to be back down the mountain in their nice warm sleeping bags before the weather changes. For each expedition, one of their customers dying of frostbite is not very good for their publicity, so they don't want this to happen. In 1996, the tragedy began when the US and New Zealand teams climbers were still around the top, at the top of the mountain later in the afternoon, and the team leaders were trying to bring them down when a very strong storm blew in. These two teams were in competition with each other for each other's business, and the leaders wanted to make sure everybody gets to the top. You pay a lot of money, you want to go to the top. If you're a paying climber and Everest has been your lifetime's dream, can you imagine just 200 meters from the top of the world somebody telling you, you've got to go down? You will say, no way, I want to get to the top of the world. So because of this, a disaster started where people got lost, they ran out of oxygen, they froze, and in the storm nobody could see where they were going. Even the professional mountain climbers of Nepal, they're called Sherpas. Sherpas, they were too weak to help carry the climbers. 10 climbers managed to get back down to that area, to this area at 25,000 feet. And at this area, 25,000, it's located in a flat area about the size of 3 football fields. But because it was so late, it was night time, and the snow was blowing so strongly, nobody could see anything, and some of the climbers froze to death about here, only 40 meters away from their tents and safety. The safety of their warm tents. Higher up on the mountain, the team leaders with the slower climbers also froze to death. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, in all of this tragedy, what happened to the Taiwanese teams? The Taiwanese team. Well, the Taiwanese, one of its 2 climbers fell off the mountain, unfortunately. But the other climber, in remembering his friend, reached the summit. But coming down again, he too was caught in a terrible storm, and he had to spend the night at 27,500 feet, high on the mountain, without a tent, sitting in the freezing snowstorm. This Taiwanese climber, all night he kept moving so he wouldn't freeze to death. The next day, when the storm stopped, 2 Sherpas came to collect him and help him down the mountain. Unfortunately, this Taiwanese guy, he lost his nose, he lost his fingers, he lost his toes, but he got to the top of the mountain and he survived. So, in conclusion, I think anyone who has the ambition to climb this mountain, you must think very long and hard about the risks involved. If you do go up, there is a chance that you could lose your fingers, your nose, etc., or even worse, to frostbite. As for me, I like mountain climbing very much, And last weekend, after a hard struggle, I managed to climb Yaminsa. I made it to the top just after I pushed two old women out of the way.
Okay,